Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another We've Read the Documents live stream. Your host, John Brissett. Thank you for being a subscriber. If you want to support my work, buy me coffee/We've Read, or you can donate using PayPal or Cash App in the show notes or pinned comment. God bless everyone who donates. If you want to subscribe to work, search for We've Read the Documents on Odyssey, Patreon, Substack, Rumble, and YouTube. Substack gives you the greatest access to my content. You get access to my written work, as well as my live streams in podcast format, and my fellow brother in Christ tonight, Jeremy Son, have a Christian podcast. By their fruits, listen to wherever you listen to your podcasts. So I did a breakdown on the Moonies on Recluses, the Farm podcast, many years ago, and I figured it would be good to play now because I have greater context now, and give commentary to it. Because I understand far more about the CNP than I did at that time. Okay, so let's start.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Anyway. Okay. All right, so we're going to link the Moonies to an outfit that you are very passionate about and which will further illustrate why this group still matters. So the ties that you're going to focus on are the ones between the Moonies and the Council for National Policy, or CNP. We've been alluding to it, obviously, throughout here. Don just did a great segue into this. But now I wanted you to get your take on the beginning of the relationship, John.
Yeah, so there were many members, and we're going to talk about a lot of them. We've already talked about a lot of them who have associations with the Unification Church and the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. There's so many that you cannot separate the two, even if you wanted to, because there's just too many connections. This isn't 6 or 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. This is like multiple 1 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? So there's so many connections, with members and funding and platform boosting of both sides, that it's almost inescapable. And, when the CNP was founded initially in 1981, there were numerous members that were there at the initial meeting on May the 19th, like Tim LaHaye, Richard Viguerie, who Don mentioned earlier and gave us a lot of insight between Viguerie's connections and to the Unification Church. Jerry Falwell, James Robinson, Dr. Cleon Skousen. All of those people were at the first meeting,
and welcome to the
have direct ties to the Unification Church, which I'm going to get into a little bit later. But even from its inception, the two were very strongly linked together.
All right, so were the Moonies providing the CNP with early funding as well, John? Yes,
they were. Supposedly, Tim LaHaye received $500,000 from Bo He-Pak to help start the Council for National Policy in 1981. Now, you can look on any membership list. We don't have them all, okay? And I'm going to discuss more about that later. But the Reverend Sun Myung Moon obviously isn't on any CNP list. But when you have these connections between all the members that were around or even part of the Unification Church that were CNP members, and when you get to that part, you start to realize that they were initial, even more than just funding. They were initial in the foundation. Moon was initial in the foundation of the Council for National Policy. You can even argue that without the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, without the Unification Church, the CNP would have not been able to get its proper footing to be able to establish itself. Now, there were other people who helped to fund the CNP that we know of, like the Coors family, the Rockefellers, the Kochs, but still very few people talk about Moon's funding, about Moon having a very strong relationship with Tim LaHaye. who was at least the figurehead or the one that they pushed forward as the founder of the Council for National Policy. Of course, Tim LaHaye would be the author for the Left Behind series of novels and be a very strong proponent for Christian Zionism. And so LaHaye.
So yeah, not really too much to add there. Tim LaHaye would author Left Behind with Council for National Policy member Jerry B. Jenkins, who is the father of Dallas Jenkins, who has made the Ecumenical Chosen series. As Laura from Magical Mystery Church had recently also stated on her CNP video that she just recently put out, which is very true. So that's the only thing I really have to add to that, to what I said, many, many years ago.
Never denied the charge or the allegation, should I say, that he got the money from Bohe Pak from Sun Myung Moon, but there is a tape where LaHaye thanked Pak for the $500,000. So they definitely ended up getting that money to help fund the Council for National Policy. Of course, Tim LaHaye would later go on to serve on the board of directors of the Christian Voice, and then later for another organization, the Council for Religious Freedom. So again, you're going to see connections between all of these players within the CNP and within the Unification Church. They go hand in hand, with one another. They would both, and it's interesting because you would think the Council for National Policy would be such a Christian conservative organization, right? Like, why would they throw their lot in with the Unification Church when the Reverend Moon had mentioned that Jesus Christ had failed his mission because he was quote unquote executed, and that it was going to be his mission as the new Messiah to unite the world through uniting all religions. So it's very interesting that the CNP, with all of these evangelical Christians, you'd think that they would reject that, right? Well, they're able not to reject that because they'll overlook that part. They'll overlook the blasphemy for power and for money, as well as, governmental ties. The Unification Church having connections to the Korean Central Intelligence Agency, which has its own, connections to the United States Central Intelligence Agency. Because they'll overlook that. And the CNP itself. The CNP has, numerous connections to the Central Intelligence Agency. Very powerful people within the CNP are Scientologists or Mormons. You kind of see the Scientology Mormon Unification Church nexus kind of like forming around each other. Right. And we'll talk more about that later when we talk about W. Cleon Skousen. But
it's just never changed. The CNP being in bed with Mormons and Mormonism and Scientology, of course, something that I've discussed previously in the past. And it was good to see Dana Duda on X go after Candace Owens, in that it was Scientologist John Mappin, who was from Camelot Castle, who was a big pusher of the QAnon operation, was the funder and starter and really good friend of the Kirks. The funding and he provided the funding and was one of the founders of Turning Point UK, and he was a major Scientologist, John Mappin. And John Mappin's name is in Epstein's Black Book.
You just you start seeing the same players over and over again when you're researching all this stuff. And as Keith Allen Dennis has said, it's very hidden. I remember I had woken up to conspiracies, for lack of a better term, 2008 when I heard Alex Jones on Coast to Coast AM talk about how 9/11 was an inside job. But I didn't hear about the Council for National Policy until a good friend of mine, in fact, my best friend, recommended me watch The Secret Right. They heard somebody mention on a message board of why we shouldn't trust Donald Trump during the 2016 election. And I watched it. I remember, just laughing it off and like, man, I've been around forever. I've heard the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, all the councils you can think of, and I would have heard about the CNP by now. What are you talking about? And I hadn't watched the second movie that really goes into Alex Jones is a member of the CNP, you know. So yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff is hidden. You won't, hear a lot about the CNP, and you won't hear a lot about the Unification Church because they're tied in the hip to one another.
Okay, that is definitely great. All right. So another guy that we've heard a little bit before already, Jerry Falwell, and of course his moral majority. There's also some interesting ties in this whole nexus that you're talking about, John, right?
Yeah. So Jerry Falwell, just readily admitted he didn't care. They accepted $2.5 million from Moon in 1994 to bail out Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. And the bailout was funneled through a Unification Church organization known as the Women's Federation for World Peace, which was also chaired by CNP founding member Tim LaHaye's wife, Beverly LaHaye, which was also in the CNP as well. The Women's Federation for World Peace also ended up paying $3.5 million to the Christian Heritage Foundation, which in turn bought Jerry Falwell $73 million in debt and then wrote it off. So, yeah, Falwell had no problem getting in bed with the Unification Church. But it was even before then. I mean, we're going to talk about the God and Freedom Banquet, and the very interesting, about that is Falwell was defending the Unification Church then, so it just happened to be during the 90s that he needed money, and he either went to Moon or Moon came to him and said, we'll buy you out. And there's a good picture of this article, Interreligious Federation for World Peace, where it was December 1995 in a private meeting in Uruguay. Moon is just bear hugging Jerry Falwell like he loves him, just bear hugging him, and just crap eating grin on Moon's face. And Falwell's just laughing. And I guess he had no problem as a big, evangelical Christian taking this false messiah, this false prophet's money.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's sickening to me.
Yeah. Especially when we're going to get into in the next installment in this series where exactly a lot of that money was probably coming from in the first place, which puts even further taint on it beyond the fact that it was being administered by a creepy cult leader. But what about this God and Freedom Banquet that you've been alluding to, John?
Okay, I got a lot about this, and I watched it again last night, and oh boy, I don't know how I could stomach it. I feel like I was going to puke. It's how much they fawn over Moon is ridiculous. It's not like you could say some of it is probably fake fawning for power or for money purposes, but a lot of it is legit. Some of them see Moon as the Messiah or a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. We'll get to more on that a little bit later. But it's really it's a disgusting thing to watch. It made me, I could barely stomach it. So the God and Freedom Banquet was held on August 20th, 1985, the Regency Ballroom, the Omni Shoreham Hotel in Washington, D.C. Gary Jarman, who Don had mentioned earlier, who was Council for National Policy member, helped organize the banquet. Even though before then, at that time, he said that he had really nothing to do with Unification Church anymore, which of course that's a lie. So there's a press conference before the banquet. Jerry Falwell and Joseph Lowry, Joseph Lowry was an African-American civil rights leader. He was president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, spoke about how Reagan had been silent on pardoning Moon. And they were trying to put pressure on Reagan to do so because they believed that Moon was unjustly persecuted for his tax evasion and conspiracy crimes that he was serving jail time for, which, the Unification Church was doing a lot more, as all we know, here, than just those two crimes. But sometimes they get a person on whatever they can get them on. But I tried to find that press conference. I couldn't find it. But again, like I said, I did find the God and Freedom banquet. So supposedly there was 1,700 ministers, rabbis, government officials, power brokers, family members, etc., that attended the banquet. So that is a lot of people. And the God of Freedom banquet was in honor of Moon being released from prison. Now, at the time, he was still staying in a halfway house. It's contingent on his release. But yes, it was for him being released from prison. And all these people were joyous in that occurring. And I remember watching it. And the MC was Dr. Donald Sills. And Sills, I can't really find if he's in the CNP, but we don't have the roster for every year. And when I checked the 2014 leaked membership list that was released by the Southern Poverty Law Center, they do have it in memoriam. So you're able to tell, if some of the people that you didn't know previously on other lists were members or not, if all the members are listed in an in memoriam section of the membership list. I checked to see if any of these people that were unknown previously, if they were CNP members or not. I couldn't find it. So it's likely, in my opinion, that Dr. Donald Sills was in the CNP likely. I just don't have any concrete proof. What about you guys? Don or Keith or Recluse, have you ever came across any list that had Dr. Donald Sills? Honestly,
I got nothing. You're the expert on CNP.
Okay.
I'm more of an
nothing
ancient history guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything either, other than a very interesting anecdote that I probably won't have time to share today, as it pertains to Donald Sills sitting next to two known CNP members. So anyway, go ahead, John.
Yeah, that wouldn't. Who were they, Don? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, that particular event where they're basically the three the three guests of honor at a big gathering of all Moonies.
Mm-hmm.
You had Robert Grant, who I'd already brought up. Gary Jarman had worked with him at the Christian Voice, and you had Ron Godwin. And then you have Don Sills.
Okay. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that Donald Sills was a CNP member, but it's kind of like my white well as far as the CNP list is. I'm trying to hunt down because it's my belief that Lawrence E. King from the Franklin scandal was a member of the Council for National Policy. He would have had to have been. And so I'm trying to find those missing lists around the mid to late 1980s and see if I can find them on a list or not, because I think that would be groundbreaking if I was able to.
Still my white well. Where are you, Lawrence? I'm trying to track you down. I know you're in the CNP, Lawrence.
I'll find that, but that's an aside. So the speakers at the God and Freedom Banquet, actually, before I get to that, when I was watching it, they gave Moon this huge trophy. I mean, this trophy was huge. All right. In a commemoration of him being released from prison. And then they also gave him like a Native American like sound drum. And they were just giving him presents, like you would give presents to like a king, and I was like,
That's
okay.
how he liked it. That's how he liked it, man.
Yeah. I mean, when you're a narcissist and you're a cult leader, like that, that full praise, right? So that was interesting. And then, so the speaker.
So more on Donald Sills real quick. So Dr. Donald Sills was a Baptist minister and was one of the founders of George Wythe College and previous chairman of the George Wythe Foundation Board of Trustees. Sills has been in films, appeared in hundreds of broadcast radio and television programs, including The Phil Donahue Show, The Larry King Live, Pat Robertson's 700 Club. And along with the Mormon, former FBI agent, CNP founder, and major John Birch Society member W. Cleon Skousen, we're talking about ecumenicalism in the name of politics, right? He taught the Making of America conferences internationally. Something tells me that those Making of America conferences were heavily Mormon, which is just Freemasonry, influenced. Okay, history of America. He was the president of the Unification Church and Mooney-funded Coalition for Religious Freedom. And a Coalition for Religious Freedom was specifically tasked with combating anyone who was against the Unification Church and anyone who was against Sun Myung Moon. That's all it was. That's all it was. An executive director for the World Council for Religious Liberty in Geneva, Switzerland. So Seals was compromised to the hilt.
Started speaking, and I'm not going to really probably go. Well, actually, I probably will go with them in that order they speak. Well, at least I think I will. So the first person who spoke was Dr. Robert Grant, who was on the CNP list 1984, 1985, 1988, 1994, 1998, and 1999. So he was there for a good, at least that we know of, 16 years within the Council for National Policy. That's a long time. That's a long time to being in the CNP. All right, that's not just some run-of-the-mill person that just happens to join. He was in there for a while. Of course, you guys had talked a lot about a Grant, and I'll talk a little bit more about him when we discuss another group that he was in that had ties to the Unification Church later. But I found that very interesting that he was in the CNP for so very long. So he gets up in the speech, and like most of these people, and there's only going to be a few speeches that I talk about, just giving, all of them were giving Moon like the complete adoration that they can give him, so much so that Dr. Donald Sills keeps having to mention, these people, they wish they could have hours to go over their time to talk about how much they love the Unification Church and how much the Reverend Sun Myung Moon has been persecuted, like hours and hours, but they only have 20 or 30 minutes, to give their speeches. And it's just sickening. So then you have Dr. Joseph Lowry, who was at the press conference earlier before the banquet. He gives a speech. And then W. Cleon Skousen gives a speech, and then, which I'm going to, of course, with Skousen, he was a founding member of the CNP. He was listed on the board of governors of the CNP in 1982. He was a former FBI agent. He was under, I think he was like the number 3 man or number 2nd man under J. Edgar Hoover. Of course, a big Mormon. W. Cleon Skousen's nephews, Mark Skousen and Joel Skousen, would also be Council for National Policy members. Mark Skousen would influence more of your stereotypical conservative right, where Joel Skousen, who would run kind of like a survival blog and website, would go more on your conspiracy shows like Alex Jones or Jeff Rentz. And so Skousen was up there. And so Skousen worked closely with CAUSA. And one of the main things he said of Moon was that he believes, Skousen believes that Moon, being Unification Church, being a part of, the world, is a fulfillment of Mormon prophecy regarding the premillennial preparation of the earth.
He's like the white horse. He's the guy on the white horse or something.
Yeah, sure. I don't think so. I would say more likely that Moon was closer to being a Antichrist, not the Antichrist, but whatever.
The Mormons have this prophecy that when the nation is hanging by a thread and its constitution is in great danger, that a man on a white horse, as they call it, will. Yeah, you know about this. Okay.
And that's how they were looking at it, Keith. Huh. They were looking.
So yeah, the Mormons do have, as Randy said in the chat, shout out to Randy, love you, brother, God bless you. The Mormons have a white horse prophecy that in the time when the American Constitution is battered and tattered and on its last legs, and the country is about to be taken over, then the Mormons will rise up by, a so-called figure on the white horse, and that the Mormons would go to the Rocky Mountains and be a great and mighty people. Okay, so the Rocky Mountain, Colorado region, it's interesting. We have a lot of bases, deep underground bases, and the Denver airport in Denver, right? Which would be, obviously where the kind of the region of the Rocky Mountains, right? So that's extraordinarily interesting there. And they also talk about it leads to the red horse also plays a role in the white horse prophecy, that you have kind of like a war uniting America, which is kind of like an inversion of the white horse, which I believe is the Antichrist, and the red horse, which would be World War III, right? So the Mormons have kind of like that as a belief system. And at one time, like I said, W. Cleon Skousen, to my knowledge, alluded to that Moon was that rider on the white horse. And then later, as Randy said in the chat, they also thought Mitt Romney was going to be that fulfillment, who ran for president. So that's interesting. And the crown that was given to Moon in our Senate chambers in the early 2000s was very similar to Trump's crown that was given to him by the South Korean leader, which was the crown with kind of like that serpentine dragon pattern that came from White Horse Mound or White Horse Cave, right? Which have the picture of the flying white horse in the back that the king had rode to unify all of Korea and strengthen it, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's interesting. It's all very interesting.
Looking at it, that Moon was going to come and rescue us all, and it's just like, wow,
I figured it was going to be Romney, but okay, sure.
No, instead, Skousen and the rest of them wanted it to be Moon, so
Right.
We'll just take that as it is, I guess. And so then they actually, I think it was beforehand, Orrin Hatch's sister gets up. All right, now Orrin Hatch, of course, spoke at many CAUSA conferences, and Orrin Hatch's sister gets up and reads a letter just praising Moon that Orrin Hatch had written. I guess he couldn't have been there at the Freedom Banquet for some reason. But he was just, she was just giving so much adoration. And again, it's been mentioned through many publications that I've read to do research on both the Unification Church and the God and Freedom Banquet, that there were many, many Mormons that attended CAUSA conferences. Now, Don, did you see yourself a lot of personal connections between Mormons or Mormonism and the Unification Church by chance?
There was excuse me, there was nothing that was obvious. I guess
Yes.
That's the best way of putting it. Other than Skousen, I just can't think of anybody that has shown up on my radar that sticks out as being a significant figure in this conversation. I guess that's all I can say here.
Yeah, it wasn't big figures, but apparently at many of the Mooney functions, there were a lot of Mormons, at least from what I read. I don't know how much that is true, but it's just from what I read that it was quite frequently that occurred.
And it does make me kind of sad. Don was my friend, Don Diligent, and we did do a lot of research together on the CNP and kind of like the groups around the CNP, WACL, and, he was an ex-member for a very long time within the Unification Church, and he came out of it and, kind of hardened his heart towards God and started believing in Joseph Ashhill, Caesar's Messiah. And he died kind of unexpected, even though he was dealing with health issues. I'm not really going to go into deep what those were. And, he, to my knowledge, didn't accept Jesus as the one and only Messiah, and it saddens me to this day. We mourn the ones who never are born again, who pass away. And, it sucks, but it is what it is. Don did do a lot of great research and exposed the Unification Church. And I don't want his research to be forgotten.
So the next speaker you had was Arnaud de Borchgrave, who was listed as a member of the CNP in 1988. Of course, he's editor-in-chief from 1985 to 1991 of the Unification Church-owned Washington Times and Insight too as well. So it's very interesting.
He was on the board of the American WACL chapter in the 80s, Singlob's USCWF, U.S. Council for World Freedom. His name's on the. He was on the board of WACL in the 80s. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
No, interrupt any time. And he was also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations too. So it's interesting. He was a member of both think tanks, but that happens quite often. And then he also was a director of the Center for International Studies, which included other CNP members like Edward Fulner, Paul Craig Roberts, and William E. Simon, as well.
Good old Paul Craig Roberts. The conspiracy researcher, right? Josh Reeves. I'm not even going to say what Josh Reeves used to call him. But yeah, all that research he did was Council for National Policy for many, many years. Don't really know how I feel about that. One of the reasons why John Kleizak and I have a copy of Barb Marks Hubbard's Revelation manuscript was because Paul Craig Roberts and had one on his website. And he did speak out against Barbara Marks Hubbard. I really don't know what I think or how I feel about Paul Craig Roberts. I don't trust him because of all the serious connections that he had with the CNP and everything. But at least can thank him for that, I guess.
Well, as Henry Kissinger was also part of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. So Arnaud de Borchgrave, and some people have argued that, of course, Paul Rodriguez covered a lot of the Brownstone, Franklin, and Craig J. Spence, even the Finders articles from the Washington Times, right? So some people might believe that Arnaud de Borchgrave maybe didn't approve some of the things that supposedly Paul Rodriguez wanted to report, because Paul Rodriguez, I guess, hadn't realized, per se, of the Council for National Policy at the time, and who blamed him, had only been really in published in Russ Ballard's book, The Course Connection. It's not like it is now, where it might be easier to find the CNP that they exist now, but even now, most people have never heard of it. So that's very interesting. That's very interesting that some people say that it was Arnaud de Borchgrave that kind of limited Paul Rodriguez's reporting on all those scandals. And then, of course, Paul Rodriguez, after the early 90s, would be relegated to obscurity. He'd be forced to from being publishing to Washington Times to move to their magazine Insight, and then he have this great reporter breaking all these all this information, and then just being pushed off to the side, which I question Paul Rodriguez. Of course, he worked for the Washington Times. How truthful his reporting could really be, but I think just because they kind of pushed him off to the side and kind of put him off into irrelevancy, that kind of speaks for him. That speaks, because usually when they do that, when they're kind of like, okay, I'm just going to put you over here and your reporting is not going to get any traction anymore, usually means the person's on at least on the right page. And I will say, there is, if you go back and read those articles, there's a lot of information that you can get from them. It's very interesting. So yeah, and then the last speaker that you had was Dr. Milton A. Reed. And of course, he said Moon was one of the most misunderstood religious leaders since Jesus Christ. I'd have to, as a Christian, very much disagree with that. And then, so of course, Moon gets up and gives a speech, and just gets, a very, very, very prolonged ovation. Even before he speaks, just when he gets up, and then after he speaks, and ovations during his speech. These people worship him. And then at the very end, everyone there received God's Will in the World, a 38 speech anthology, the speeches that Moon had given. And that was the God and Freedom Banquet. I hope to never watch it again. Have you ever watched it, Don? Or anything that you got to say on the God and Freedom Banquet? I'd be really curious.
Well, funny that you bring that up, because it was a whole tour that Moon was going on at that time. I was stationed, quote unquote, in Denver, Colorado at the time. So these luminaries, these VIPs.
So real quick, before Don speaks, this is quite interesting here. I was looking up the last guy that was mentioned. So here we have Victory for Freedom, Portrait of a Movement for Freedom. Okay, this is about Moon, right? I'm honored to dedicate myself today to the preservation of religious freedom in this country. Now, reminder, this man's a heretic, speaking to, conservatives, Christians, Mormons, if I can raise up a beacon warning Americans of the danger which lies ahead, then my sacrifice will serve a great purpose. He only spent some jail time for tax fraud. The crimes of Moon are far greater than that, not even counting the spiritual offenses he's committed against God. Led many people to hell. The issue today is the very survival of America and the free world. To assure the survival, I'm willing to suffer any indignity, to go any distance, to do any labor, and to bear any cross. See, to him, he's sounding like he's, again, comparing himself to Jesus. The arrogancy of this man. The arrogancy in this man. This is crazy. I'm even willing to give my life if that will ensure that the nation and the world survive and do God's will. Reverend, I'm not calling him Reverend. I'm sorry I keep calling him Reverend. I don't mean to. Sunbug Moon and a reflective moon walks on the grounds of the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, where he was imprisoned. So here we have Victory for Freedom, Board of Directors, David Fincer, Ambassador Jose Maria Chavez, Warren Richardson. Okay, that's interesting. And then it's kind of like a magazine to play up Moon, right? So let's scroll down and see if we can get some more information here. So right here, Statement of Purpose. The Committee to Defend the United States Constitution was established to pursue the founding ideals of America. Now remember, this committee is CNP. This committee is funded and started by Moon. Moon is a heretic. Moon is against Jesus, against Christianity, against Christians. He's Antichrist. Okay? Got to keep in context who started this. To the end, we attempt to defend and uphold freedom in whatever way we can. We hope that this publication will further this great and noble cause. Our forefathers originally intended our nation to be governed by Judeo-Christian values. There you go, the CNP buzzword. The Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, and the Bill of Rights all reflect the religious values of the founders. What? Deism, Freemasonry, Illuminism, Unitarianism, Universalism. Yes, there were some Christians. Yes, but they weren't the majority. The founders came from a diverse theological persuasions, yet banded together beyond their denominational differences to form one nation under God. A Unitarian isn't a Christian. A deist is not a Christian. A Freemason is not a Christian. A Luciferian is not a Christian. When Alexis de Tocqueville, the great French historian, visited America, he sought her greatness in her harbors and her factories and her places of commerce. But I did not find it there. It was not until I went into her churches and found her pulpits aflame with the fire of righteousness that I found her greatness. America is great because she is good. When America ceases to be good, she will cease to be great, he stated. So let's look up Alexis de Tocqueville. So Alexis Charles Henry Cleriel Comte de Tocqueville was a former French Minister of Affairs. It was an advocate. It was a classical liberal, so the name for Fabian socialist later on, who advocated parliamentary government, was skeptical of the extremes of majoritism. All right. So this would make sense because French is mostly Catholic. He professed Catholicism. However, he was a Unitarian. A Unitarian Universalist. You see the problem with all this? I'm already 3 paragraphs in, and I can already sniff out the false Christianity, these wolves in sheep's clothing. Like, you can sniff it, right? Sniff it. We believe it's time for America to return to our source of greatness before it's too late. One man who sought to turn back the tide in America is Sung Myung Moon, who came to this country in early 1970s because of his race and his outspokenness about communism. He was ridiculed by the liberal media and generally misunderstood by many in the religious community. Well, Chad, this propaganda rag for Unification Church is telling me that I'm just misunderstood through the teachings of Moon when he goes around and says that our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ failed his mission on the cross and that Moon will finish it, unite the world in a one world religion of love and light with, performing his sacred marriages, right? Him and Mother Moon, right? Father Moon and Mother Moon will save the world, okay? I don't understand. He's just misunderstood. Only now are people beginning to understand what he represents. Yeah, not this schlock. In the following pages, we will describe his course in America in order to illustrate one man's attempt to sound the alarm and turn America back to God. What God? Moon's an Antichrist. And away from tyranny. However, he's not alone. Many other religious leaders are speaking out as well. Our hope is that God and freedom-loving people all over this country will unite together beyond race, color, and creed, and like our founding fathers, bring about a new birth of freedom. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights, was that beyond race, color, and creed? Founding of this country, America? I'm just saying. Did all races have rights in the founding? in this country? I'm a little confused here. Seems like American revisionism to me. We're Protestants. Like the Anabaptists not persecuted by those who wanted to do the American Revolution, right? Could have fooled me. Could fool me. Reverend Jerry Falwell and Dr. Joseph Lowery speak at a religious freedom press conference in Washington, D.C., marking Reverend Moon's release. Yeah. And so this would be Jerry Falwell, and this would be the man who was mentioned earlier, Joseph Lowery, because we have to sell the Unification Church to the black community, too. While the Unification Church may be the unpopular church today, next year it may be one of the rest of us standing here. I think the president should pardon Moon. I think he was the victim of a railroad job, and I think we're all in the religious community are losers because of it. And that would be from CNP, Wolf, Jerry Falwell. August 20th, 1985, the National Press Club. Ooh. Look, that's W. Cleon Scales, and look at him smiling in the back, chat. Got them Mormon smiles from drinking too much soda pop, chat. The Moon case is particularly frightening. Not only is the issue of religious liberty involved, but also the issue of racial discrimination. Governments that jail the unpopular to please the crowd will soon jail any crowd it pleases. We call upon our friend, President CNP Ronald Wilson Reagan, the Theosophist, to name a task force to investigate the erosion of religious liberty. And who ended up doing that? Who ended up fulfilling what Joseph Lowery asked for? Chat, anybody? Anybody? Who ended up doing exactly what he asked for here? Well, that would be one Donald John Trump. CNP Donald John Trump and his faith office, and he actually founded a religious persecution group or council in the United States government. Francis Schaeffer, The Christian Manifesto. As we stand for religious freedom today, we need to realize that this must include a generous religious freedom for the control of the state for all religion. So maybe one day I'll go through all this, just screw it, just looking through it now. Look, it's Moon in court. He's so solemn and sad. I mean, this is straight up propaganda. It's interesting to see who was all involved in this. It'd be interesting to take a list. Orrin Hatch, the Mormon, defending of religious liberty for Moon. Right? This is crazy. I'm going to look through this. I'm going to go back to playing it, and if I find anything, I'll interrupt.
That we're talking about here, whether it be Sills, Lowery, whoever, definitely Orrin Hatch, etc. They were actually traveling to different cities, putting on different rallies. So we're not talking about a banquet here. So we're just talking about, rallies. And rallies, generally speaking, would precede a banquet. Anytime Moon would come into a situation where he had to put on a function, as it were, usually you had the rally, and then the banquet comes after the rally. So I was right there, standing, cheering, waving at one of those rallies right there in Denver. I can remember almost like it was yesterday. So I guess that's my anecdote as far as this conversation goes.
Was the food at least good? Was the food at least good? Don?
Oh, look. It's Reverend Moon. He prayed for President Richard Milhouse Nixon. when he met the president at the White House. Well, imagine that. Imagine Moon and Richard Milhouse Nixon, chat. Oh, boy.
The food that I got?
Yeah, he didn't go to the banquet.
Yes.
He went to the rally.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get oatmeal.
Yeah. Thanks, Keith. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Anyway, maybe not oatmeal, but yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, point made.
Not chicken or fish. Yeah, it's gruel.
Correct. I certainly wasn't drinking the wine that was being served at the tables. So anyway, I won't riff.
All right. So
You
John,
can,
I know there was one final organization you wanted to get into here, John, and that was the American Conference on Religious Freedom, a movement, I guess. What can you tell us about that?
It's actually the American Coalition for Religious Freedom.
Okay. My mistake.
So the American Coalition for Religious Freedom was started supposedly to lobby against government regulation of religion. All right, but later they became lobbyists mainly for the Unification Church. So it was founded by Tim LaHaye, of course, CNP, Robert Grant, CNP, George Hansen. I don't know if George Hansen was CNP or not. I tried to verify, but I couldn't find out if it was or not. And then on the executive committee, you have many different CNP people. So you have Jerry Falwell. Falwell was on the board of.
Okay. If this doesn't sum up what we're dealing with, then I don't know what does. All right. Honored in prison. Look, we got Moon on the phone when he's in Danbury, Connecticut. On the phone. And right here we have Motherman, Moon's wife. Okay. So, over 500 people filled the United Nations delegates' dining room on November 15, 1984, where Moon and Bohai Pak were each awarded the honorary degree of Doctor Honoris Causa from the Catholic University of La Plata in Argentina. Miss Moon accepted the award on behalf of her husband. Dr. Jose Alberto Bonificio, Dean of the Facility of Social Sciences of the University, explored the significance of the honorary doctorate and why it was awarded in these two cases. In the United Nations, the Moonies, Catholics. Come on. You got to give that one to me.
Governors of the CNP back in 1982, was likely a founding member, was a member up to 1998 from what we know. Of course, Jerry Falwell is also the president, co-founder of the Moral Majority. So he was on the executive committee of the Coalition for Religious Freedom. James Robinson, CNP, Rex Humbard, I couldn't tell if he was CNP, Dr. James Kennedy, CNP, Jimmy Swaggart, I assume Swaggart's CNP, but I can't find him on any lists. Don Wildman, CNP, Paul Crouch, who founded the Trinity Broadcasting Network. I can't confirm that Paul was on any CNP list, but
that's right, chat. That's right. Did you go to the pageant for religious freedom with the Liberty Bell, chat? Let freedom ring, chat. Dr. Joseph Lowry, president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dr. Tim LaHaye, president of Family Life Seminars, present a theater piece for narrator, orchestra, and actors portraying inspired moments in America's fight for freedom for colonial times to the present Constitutional Hall. That's right. That's right, chat. Were you there? Were you there, chat? A candlelight prayer vigil will be held at Lafayette Square following the pageant. All because Moon was in prison. Do you guys understand this has nothing to do with the First Amendment? This has nothing to do with so-called religious liberty, okay? Like the government even cares about the First Amendment, all right? This is literally because Moon was in prison. Do you guys understand that? all these Christians and conservatives that they got together for this wicked Antichrist man just because he was in prison. And you know what? He should be in prison, and he should have been in prison for much longer for all of his crimes. You can listen to this, full farm episode to understand the crimes in the Unification Church, the cult that the Unification Church was. And, in all of its totality. Moon got off easy for what they've done. Ridiculous.
It's very likely that he was. Marlon Maddox, CNP, and Ben Armstrong was a CNP member. So you have majority of these people being Council for National Policy members, long-term Council for National Policy members, and likely, even the ones that I can't tell are CNP, there's very likely that they are.
They're in the room, yeah.
Yes, very much so, which you'll see with a lot of these people, even if you...
Dr. Tim LaHaye. Dear friends, if we have the same percentage of religious freedom attacks in the next 15 years that we've had in the past 15 years, we will no longer have religious freedom in America. Well, he was wrong. Personally, I blame the secular humanist philosophy that's permeated this land for the last 75 years. It's not only secularized our once great American school system, it has all but destroyed it. And in a large sense, the problem, the responsibility is our own. They have laid down the gauntlet in print in their public pronunciations that they're going to turn America into a secular humanist nation by the year 2000. Didn't happen. And be sure of this, if we sit back and do nothing, they will achieve their goal. And we have long lost all of our religious freedoms. Now, yeah, I'm mocking that part. And yeah, I kind of understand what he's saying, okay? I don't fully agree with the scaremongering and scare tactics he was using on behalf of the Unification Church for this, okay? But yeah, I mean, obviously, the rise of people becoming atheists, is a spiritual issue because there are more people that are ending up going to hell, all right? But the last paragraph is really what gets me. The last paragraph is really what gets me. Many of us are criticized by some of our colleagues and friends for participating in an ecumenical meeting like this, if you call it that. I call it that. Do you call it that, chat? Because it certainly is. Certainly is. Catholics, Mormons, the Antichrist, Unification Church, whomever. I would assume we also had... I would think, maybe I'm wrong, I think I've seen in the past some Jews as well there. So that's universalist, not even ecumenicalist, but sure. Catholics, I mean, Mormons aren't even Christians. Even just Catholics and Protestants being there is ecumenical. When we add in Mormonism, that's universal. When we add in Unification Church, it's universalist. When we add in Jews, it's universalist. So it's even a step above ecumenism. But I'll tell you this. I'd rather be criticized for speaking out than for remaining silent. We'll see exactly where Tim LaHaye's heart is. In his own words. You
can't verify them or not. So the Coalition for Religious Freedom was supposedly started in the early 1980s, and Dan Sills, who was president of the Coalition for Religious Freedom, said that he received at least $500,000 from the Unification Church for the Coalition for Religious Freedom.
And so it makes sense. If I could just interject, early 80s, this is when Moon is, looking at jail time for tax fraud and calling it religious persecution. So I can already see this as the Keep Moon Out of Jail Committee, right?
Very much is what it was. Very much.
Perfect.
So you have them going around and lobbying, trying to get Moon out of jail and, keep the Unification Church from coming under governmental investigation. So they're going around, they're probably, I would say a lot of probably the talk of Moon and the Unification Church avoiding any type of persecution from the United States government. Would it be safe to say that a lot of that talk probably happened in Council for National Policy meetings?
You tell me. I mean, it sounds
like
like
so.
Right there in the pocket. Yeah.
I think so very much. I mean, just like we had, Colonel Oliver North going to CNP meetings, raising money for the Iran-Contra affair to go to circumvent the Bolin Amendment. So,
which Moon's CAUSA also was big part of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
prosecuting the Cold War in Latin America and circumventing the U.S. Congress. I can see why they'd want to keep the guy out of jail. He was their domestic and shadow foreign policy money maker, money bags. So he's got to be free, right?
Yes, very much so. Don, was there what was the Unification Church's stance on Taiwan? I'm curious.
Ooh. Well, Moon would talk about free China, Taiwan, whatever. In some of his speeches, looping their work there with the anti-communist work that was taking place in Japan and Korea. There wasn't a whole lot of that, and I think this is just me speculating here. I think that Moon might have been kept on a short on a short leash in terms of him talking about the triangulation, shall we say, between free China, Japan, and Korea, because as Keith would well know, that triangulation is really what made the World Anti-Communist League what it is in the eyes of many. So there are talks about it as the years progress. Like by the time Moon is having his problems with his Danbury imprisonment, whatever, he's not really going down that road at that point.
Yeah, 7 Grains of Salt's done a lot of great research exposing the Rotary Club, which is just another, major group that a lot of the elites are in. 7 Grains of Salt's done a lot of great research exposing the Rotary Club within the elites. Definitely worth checking out her channel. See that information on the Rotary Club. All right, so here we have Moon delivering a message from prison from his daughter. Okay. I am now in America, and I am now in an American prison. In my 12 years of living in this country, I've never felt as close to God as I do now. I love America more than ever. If his will is being served by my imprisonment, then I'm here in gratitude. Remember, this man is Antichrist. This man is a liar. This man is a wolf. And this man's a narcissist. All right. When I served my fellow prisoners their food, unless he's forced to do it, I seriously doubt he did it by his own accord, or scraped their plates after dinner, or scrubbed the kitchen floor, I'm doing it for my heavenly Father. I'm serving his children, I'm serving America and the world. I'm therefore doing my chores with joy. I come to America in 1971 at God's command. So again, this is him getting divine revelation from God, but that never happened because he's Antichrist. So therefore, he is a liar. He is a false prophet. Okay? God told me America is his final hope, his precious jewel that he prepared for the final battle against atheist communism in the last days. Truth and love must prevail. However, America needs help. America is turning away from God, and God cannot afford to lose America. God needed Moon's help to save America from communism. God needs no man's help. You understand the arrogancy of this man? Do you understand the arrogancy of this man? Hey, Carl, I'm getting up with you. We're going to try to stream next week. I got to send you an email, brother. God bless you. Me and Carl are going to do a show on the Unification Church. I just haven't emailed him back. I need to. I'm sorry about that, Carl. Hopefully we'll be able to do it next week if you're up to it, if you're feeling good. God told me to go to America to wake people from the spiritual sleep before atheistic communism takes over the world. I need Bible for that. Someone give me Bible for that. You know, with that such a mandate, I did not come to the country to win a popularity contest. I spoke out and I took a stand. I gave America every ounce of my soul. In the process, I became unpopular and have been persecuted. Well, because you're a cult leader and you're a heretic and you're Antichrist, why do you think you became unpopular? You don't think this is God's judgment on a wicked man? Now, I've ended up in U.S. prison. This is no surprise to me, for I almost knew that such a cross would come. Oh, so humble as moon. I thank God that God's not God, it's God's Lucifer. I thank God that in my situation, Pastor Sylvan and many others have become a rallying point for religious freedom in the United States. America's religious communities must be united to pursue religious freedom. Our efforts alone and efforts like this pageant will ensure the survival of America. And then we have Dr. Joseph Lowery, who's stuck in the idol of politics in America. And he says, and I quote, "We shall form coalitions to wage a crusade for freedom, knowing full well that if we lose our religious freedom, all other ground is seeking sand. Let freedom ring. We shall unite in prayer. We shall unite in witness. Let freedom ring. Our diversity will be our strength. Let freedom ring. Our unity will be our power. Let freedom ring. And our faith will be our salvation. Let freedom ring." Faith in what? Faith in what, Lowry? Faith in Jesus? Faith in God the Father? Having faith in the Holy Spirit? Having faith on Jesus' finished work on the cross, that he is the one and only Messiah? Or believing that we have to have these God-given rights? The persecuted Christians in China, they got these God-given rights. The persecuted Christians in the Middle East, they got these God-given rights. Do the persecuted Christians in North Korea, do they have these God-given rights? What's important to them? Jesus? In North Korea, the North Korean Christians that may have only a few, small parts of Scripture, right? These, that's all they have. Is just, what we're blessed. Or you can have 10, 20, 35 Bibles in your house. You can have the Bible on your phone. You can have access to the Bible and read it at any point in given time. North Korean Christians are lucky if they have a few scriptures. Or lucky if they have a few pages. You understand how privileged we are? I'm not saying that I want to give up what little semblance of freedom we have here in the United States, that I want to be persecuted. I'm not saying that. But if it happens, then so be it. Jesus is my rest. Jesus is my salvation. Not my so-called constitutional Bill of Rights, God-given rights. I'm a slave. I am a bondservant to Jesus Christ. I am an adopted son of God. I was bought with a price. And one day, just as Jesus called the disciples friends, right? One day I'm hoping, when I'm in my glorified body, that he can say, "Well done, my faithful servant," and call me a friend as well. But to these people, that's not what this is. To these people, it's not the gospel. To these people, it's not suffering as Christ has. To these, it's let me keep my God-given rights, whatever those are. It's ridiculous. We've grown fat and lazy in America. Fat and lazy. When we get persecuted, prepare yourself. All right, let's keep scrolling down. About to end the stream. Oh, wow. Okay, this is interesting. Proud to know him. We are the members of the international academic community from universities in many countries. We are united to the cause of world peace. Who brings false peace? That'd be the Antichrist. We're privileged to know a man who has deeply held belief that God has called him to a life of devotion and action. He is the Sung Mung Moon, founder and spiritual leader of the Unification Church movement. Moon is a good and caring man. He does more than talk about the world's problems. He acts. Judge a man by what they believe or profess, or judge a man by the so-called good works that they do. They're so-called good fruits, right? Because to the world, it appeared to a lot of people that Moon was a good man who did good things. But when you hear what he confesses out of his mouth, what he believes from the heart, he's Antichrist. He's blasphemer. He's heretic. We have seen his devotion to the values of brotherhood, equality, family values, in a God-centered world. And it's not that I am against you loving, your neighbor as God has commanded you to do. It's not that I'm obviously against family. It's not, family values. It's not that I'm, against, fairness in governmental societies, right? And, I'm, obviously not against the gospel being preached and being, the Bible being forefront. But this man didn't have devotion to any of that. He was an Antichrist. What devotion? Our association with him and the organizations which he founded had clearly demonstrated to us that he is a man of integrity and vision, dedicated to proving man's humanity to man. Improving man's humanity to man. Well, that sounds like secular humanism to me. Not God supernaturally changing us so that we can love our neighbors, because everybody loves themselves. Everybody loves themselves. So that you can actually treat your neighbor with respect and love and kindness and patience, right? But it's dedicating to improving man's humanity to man. Him doing that. His vision, his integrity, not God's. He's not giving glory to God. He's not giving glory to Jesus. He's not giving glory to the Holy Spirit. He's giving glory to himself. Dedicated to secular humanism. He might as well say that. We are aware that no political, economic, or ideological system has fully solved the problems that confront humanity. We are aware that no ideological system has solved the problems that can confront humanity. Well, there is an answer. Pick up the Bible. But the world is a better place because of Moon's work. It needs more people like him. Needs fewer. People that not only propose solutions, but also inspire the work for a world of peace and justice. And they're calling for peace and safety, right? Sudden destruction, right? Maybe he was an Antichrist. Maybe he was a rider on a white horse. Sounds like to me. We're proud to know the Reverend Moon. I'm sorry I keep saying Reverend. I don't mean to say it. We will continue to work with him towards the realization of a world centered on love and transcendent values. Not a world centered on God or Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Not a world centered on the Holy Bible, which is God's word. Not a world centered on the gospel that saves and changes lives for those who believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. Not a world centered on Christians doing good works to their fellow man, loving their fellow man. giving glory to God, not that a world centered on love and transcended values. Those are just platitudes. That's just platitudes. Now, I bet if I sat here and looked through this list, you'd find some interesting people. If I started researching, you'd probably find some very interesting people. You're just trying to look. Maybe you guys might recognize people. Sponsored by the Advisory Council to the Unification Movement International. But these are secular people coming together for the Unification Church. So you had many born-again Christians concerned with the Unification Church, right? The rest of the world thought they were okay. Here's the pictures of the so-called God and Freedom Banquet. Sponsoring organizations, Coalition for Religious Freedom, Dr. Donald Sills. American Christian Cause, Dr. Robert Grant, CNP. Bishop D. Ward Nichols, Senior Bishop of the AME Church. Oof. Man, they really did infiltrate African Americans and the America Black community to get them on board for this. That's rough, man. Committee to Defend the U.S. Constitution, Shaw Divinity School, Dr. Joseph C. Page. Executive Vice President, Frederick Douglass Memorial Foundation, Kenneth Frazier. Director, Latin American Strategic Studies Institute, Tom Dowling, CASA USA, which is Mooney, Unification Church Against Communism. CASA International. Wake Up America. Let's see here. Carl Prusson, Chairman of Unification Church of America. Free Asian Foundation, Gary Jarman, CNP President. Alabama Concerned Ministers for Human Rights. Man, just a whole bunch of pastors. This is interesting. American Citizens and Lawrence Association, which would be CNP Jack McLam. So Jack McLam, he was, let's see here. I think he was former police, right? I'm thinking about the right person. Yeah, I am. So that'd be former veteran and conspiracy pusher, Phoenix police officer, Gerald Jack McLam. So I was right about that. You could probably go through a list of all these people. I'm just leaving them up there if anybody wants to look at it. If anybody in the comment section could see who some of these people are. I don't know everybody. It's impossible for me to know everybody. Dr. Joseph Page, Executive Vice President of the Shaw Divinity School in my home state, Raleigh, North Carolina. Man, they just like the Flynn Reawaken America tour. The CNP literally knows how to get its hands in compromising pastors. Oh man, look at this list of those people. Chief Robert Gopher, director of the International Powwow Society, presents a ceremonial drum to Moon. Chief Gopher said the drum is presented to a person most dedicated to the Creator. He is the one who loves the Creator and the people of all races. Right there, look at that ceremonial drum with the bison on there. That's not Christian. Orrin Hatch, Mormon. Utah senator. Look, I mean, just giving him all these trophies and all these rewards and just giving him all this stuff. So let's read from Dr. Robert Grant real quick. We're almost done. How would George Washington and Thomas Jefferson view the case of Moon if they had lived today? They would, I suspect, applaud the 40 major religious organizations who joined the Amici Friends of the Court in support of Moon. They would have scorned the bureaucrats who bent all the rules to get to this man. They would lament the establishment of proceedings that have overturned the basic right of an accused to choose either a jury or a bench trial. They would have announced the presumption of civil judges and courts to dictate to churches how they should handle their money and govern their internal affairs. They would bemoan the failure of Supreme Court to stand as the final arbiter of justice and defend the one who isn't God the final arbiter of justice? Okay. And defend the one who is being unfairly treated, and they would join together, I suspect, to pray devoutly in the soon demise of these politicians, the judges, the bureaucrats who abuse the power of their office by striking the very heart of our God-given religious rights. Keep hearing that term, right? Well, Grant, Thomas Jefferson was a deist who rejected Jesus' divinity and was not a born-again Christian, and George Washington wasn't either. He was a Freemason. So, yeah. I encourage tonight, God is still on the throne. He is sovereign. This is a battle that we can win, my friends, and with God's grace, we're going to do so. Okay. Dr. Joseph Lowry, who I covered earlier. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to say a word on the occasion of Moon's release. In this contest some months ago, at the beginning of the struggle, I said that God moves in mysterious ways. And out of the imprisonment of Brother Moon has come to a new realization for the need of the community of faith to come together to protect these liberties that are all dear to all of us. We come to realize that unless we protect each other, there's no security for any of us. If Moon is not secured, neither is Bob Grant's liberty, nor Don Sills, nor Joseph Lowry's, or anybody's. And that's why we've come here today to say that we should come together in spite of many of our diversities. And God knows we have some real diversities. If you're here for religious freedom for anybody, you have to be for religious freedom for everybody. So we're all just coming together in a big ecumenical pot, universalist pot, for so-called religious freedom. When Moon was arrested and convicted and served jail time for tax fraud, have nothing to do with him being a cult leader of a heretical Unification church. That's not what he was sent to court for. That's not what he was convicted for by the federal government. So, yeah, the whole thing's a sham. The Mormon W. Cleon Skousen. Moon, I bring you the greetings of my wife and my children and my 42 grandchildren. Man, the Mormons know how to have a lot of babies. There are 3 days in August that I shall always remember. August 13th, my wedding day. August 29th, my wife's birthday. And August 20, when we welcomed Moon back to freedom. So Moon being back to freedom, being freed from jail, is as important to Skousen as his wedding day and his wife's birthday. When Moon came to the United States in 1971, he couldn't speak a word of English. Sort of a fantastic situation, really, but he had a message for America from the Bible, and it's the same in Korean as it is in English. If my people who are called... This guy's a Mormon! If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my faith and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sins and heal this great land. That is a butchering of the Bible. A butchering of the Bible. In support of Moon and Antichrist. By Skousen, a Mormon. Oh, dear Lord. Now, the peoples of this land are God's people. They're not only the people that belong to God in a sense, they are special people. That's Mormon doctrine, right? That's Mormon doctrine. Either they or their ancestors fled from places around the world to come to this land where God had created the first free people. That's Mormon doctrine. And there were Christians in there that didn't just walk out because they're brainwashed under a delusion. You could argue it's the same delusion that they're under now. Now, maybe it's a greater delusion of Trump's Antichrist. Was it Trump unfairly persecuted by the courts, chat? Was Trump unfairly persecuted by the courts? Didn't the CNP rally and have major rallies to free Trump, very similar to Moon? Right, chat? Oh, dear Lord. However, today we found that innocent people are beginning to be put in prison. We found our churches in chains that crossed their doors with padlocks. We found ministers being arrested from posture of prayer and put into prison. I didn't think it was that widespread during the 70s and 80s. We found mothers and fathers jailed because they didn't want their children exposed to some of the books, the humanistic and false philosophies taught by some of the teachers. And they did not want their children to be other than just fine, upstanding American people. They didn't want them in these government schools. They were arrested for that. That's wrong. You have a right to send your child to a private school. You have a right to teach your kids from home. It's not even a right that government gives you. You should have the opportunity to do so. You should, you should be able just to do it. But anyway, you see, something has changed. Something was wrong. So Moon came to America in 1971 in inspiration of the diamond dust of God's great spirit that drifts down on the human family. If they listen to it, oh dear Lord. And he came here to tell us to humble ourselves and to pray and to seek his faith and turn from our wicked ways, because God would hear us, he would forgive our sins, and he would heal this great land. Now, obviously, en masse, people became born again in America. And, they believed that, Jesus Christ is the Messiah, and God would hear their prayers, and there was a mass, revival, so-called, in America. Then, God, I would hope, being long-suffering, would have mercy on this nation, just like he had mercy on Nineveh. And they're, turning towards God, right? And being generally sorrowful over their sins. Biblically, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not saying I think it's wrong. I'd be very happy if that happened, but I don't think it's going to happen. Well, okay, so he says, well, how do you do this? Yeah, chat. Christians actually standing up and doing the Great Commission and preaching the gospel and living Christ-like lives and giving their testimony, or by Christian nationalism and NAR and dominionism and theonomy and making nominal Christians? How do we get God's favor on this nation? All right, let's see what the Mormon W. Cleon Skousen has to say. He started out by saying that you got to have at least a major newspaper that tells the truth. So he invested $150 to $200 million in the Washington Times, which has now become a national newspaper. My son, who works in the White House, tells me it's the most widely read paper in the Royal Palace. I would assume that is Mark Skousen, Council for National Policy. No. Was Mark Skousen his son, or was he also his uncle? Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, it's a different Skousen. It's not Mark Skousen. My bad. My bad. A lot of Skousens. Then he said we ought to get all those who are the leaders of the congregations of the churches of God assembled together and unite in a program that will make them feel comfortable with each other and fight together against evil. Now, that's a great achievement if you can do it. He didn't ask us to change our theology. He didn't ask us to become born again. He didn't ask us to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. He didn't care if you're a Mormon, Catholic, Jehovah's Witness. Didn't matter. Didn't matter to Moon. Why? Because Moon ain't saved. Moon is an Antichrist. He just said, let's eat together, let's talk together, let's pray together. Ecumenical and universalism right there. Learn together. And after that, we'll work together against evil. The greatness of Moon is that he's not only saying these things, but he's inspiring us to do them. Moon, we're glad you're with us tonight. Welcome back to the frontline trenches in this great battle. Welcome back. Now, these are just excerpts of their actual speeches. You can go listen to them. All right, that's all I got. That's all I got. I'd love to actually maybe dive a little bit deeper into this if I have time and, pull some more quotes. But it's enough. What I've shown is enough for anybody who's a true born-again Christian. Should immediately be like, nope, CNP is no good. No good. Unification Church are a bunch of heretics. Your donations are greatly appreciated. The links for donations are at the top of the chat and on the show notes to help me be able to do more streams and do more research. Morrison asked in the chat, how do I feel about Candace Owens covering the NAR? I mean, she's limited to Hangout covering them. This is Catholic exposing Protestantism, so, I mean, limited Hangout exposure. She's not going in really in depth.